Welcome back to Mr. Rowley's Virtual Music Classroom. Today we're going to learn about chords. This will be the first lesson about chords because there are so many different ways we can put chords together. So we're going to learn the first simple chords that we recognize and see and use from the major scale and the minor scales. The definition of a chord is any time we play, sing, hear, or see two or more pitches sounded simultaneously. Understanding chords and how they work together will be very important as we move to the next step of songwriting and composition. If you've written a melody, the next step is that, and we will talk about that in those lessons, the lessons on songwriting and lessons on composition. But to have an understanding of how chords work and how they work together will make it easier for you to understand how to make your melody sound like a song when you add your other instruments and things like that, because that's when we're using the chords. During this lesson, I will also be showing you how chords look on a piano and how they look on a guitar. They function the same, but there is some differences in which pitches from the chords are sounding and how we use those pitches in different ways. We're mostly going to talk about root position or first position in guitar, root position on the piano. A little bit about voice leading, but voice leading in itself is a whole nother lesson that'll be later on, but I'll give you some examples of how they work together in this lesson as well. But I'll give you an example of how the chords work on those two instruments because they're a little bit different. Because those may be the instruments that you're using when you are creating chords for your compositions or songs in the future. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about triads. Triads are built in thirds, meaning that from one pitch to the next pitch, they're a third apart. If you see it on a music staff, they're either line, 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 or space, space, space. The quality of those thirds is what we need to discuss because that is what determines the quality of the chords. A major triad is three notes stacked on top of each other in thirds. The bottom two notes of the stack are a major third apart in distance or interval. The top two notes are a minor third apart in interval. Played together, they make up a major triad. A minor triad, again, still three notes stacked in thirds. The bottom two notes are a minor third apart, and the top two pitches are a major third apart. The next triad that we see in the major scale, we only see one of them, is the diminished triad. The diminished triad, again, three notes stacked in thirds, with the bottom two pitches being a minor third apart, and the top two pitches also being a minor third apart. We see one other kind of triad, and we'll see it in the minor scale, but we call this one an augmented triad. And it's the other combination that we can have. Again, three pitches stacked in thirds. The bottom two pitches are a major third, and the top two pitches are also a major third, which equals an augmented triad. So now we understand how triads, or simple chords from the major scale, are built. Now let's look at how they look in the sequence of each degree of the scale. As you can see, we have a major scale here, a C major scale. And I'm stacking pitches in thirds on top of each degree of the scale, creating triads. These are the triads of the major scale. We could add more notes on top. That would be creating different and more complex chords. These are just the triads. Again, each scale degree can have a triad built on it. When talking about and listening to chords, and in particular triads, we're going to talk about the quality of a triad or a chord. The quality is whether it's a major sounding chord or a minor sounding chord or of course, diminished sounding or augmented sounding. Each of those chord sounds have a quality to them. The qualities of chords, or any pitches put together, which by definition are chords, can be described from their consonance or dissonance in the interactions between the pitches. Consonant interactions are pleasant sounding to our ears. Dissonant interactions are unpleasant sounds to our ears. Now that's changed over time. There was a time when only the octave or the fifth or the fourth were those pleasant sounds. Probably why we call them perfect when we describe the intervals. Thirds were the next ones to come along to be thought of as more consonant, and today we accept them as consonant, both major and minor. But the reason minor sounds darker is because it's a little bit more dissonant. Seconds, half steps, minor seconds, major seconds, tritones, those are all dissonant sounds, and we want to hear them resolved to a consonant sound. They create tension in music, and that's what we'd like to have. If all we had was consonant sounds, music would not have the emotions that it has. We need the dissonant sounds to create tension and release throughout listening to music, which creates its interest. So that gives you an idea of what the quality of sound is and what dissonance and consonance means when we're talking about pitch and the interactions between different pitches. These are all based on the harmonic series, these sounds. They are ratios of the sounds being sounded together. The harmonic series is a very complex, almost scientific, well, not almost, it is a scientific explanation of the vibrations of sound from pitches and how they work together. I'll do a lesson on the harmonic series later in the music theory series. It's kind of a complex understanding of how sounds work together. That's not appropriate right now, as you are just beginning to learn about chords and how we put notes together. But do understand the difference between consonant sound, sounds that sound to our ears good or better, and dissonant sounds, sounds that sound to our ears bad or in tension with each other. I don't like the words good and bad. I like the words sounding consonant and dissonance because they all have their functions when we're writing music. The quality of chords can sometimes be described using other words to help us understand how they can work with music in displaying or depicting emotions that a composer is trying to depict. For major, happy, celebratory, those are the words we kind of think of when we think of major. Feeling very comfortable. Minor is close, but it's more somber, melodramatic, or more melancholy is usually when we think of minor keys. Diminished, when it comes to a diminished chord, it is dark, unstable sounding. Some would call off-putting. And augmented chords are like major chord, wide open sound. It's unstable, sounds like it wants to go somewhere. So those are an idea of descriptors for the 4 different qualities of chords that we're talking about. When looking at and understand chords in a key, their quality and how we label them, you can see here that we're in the key of C major, so we label it with a capital C if we're analyzing in classical music. Then we use the Roman numeral 1 for the first degree of the first chord, which is the tonic chord. And then we have a chord call at the top, which is just the C. We might see this in jazz music or in lead sheets for popular forms of music. The Roman numeral 1 is a capital Roman numeral. In the next one, it's a lowercase Roman numeral 2. That delineates that it's minor. D minor is the 2 chord in the key of C. The 3 chord is also minor, and it's the E minor chord. The next chord is the 4 chord. It's a capital 4 because it's a major chord, and it's F major, so F chord for the chord call at the top. The next, the dominant, the chord built on the dominant, is the 5 chord. It is the G chord. Notice that the 1, the 4, and the 5 are all major chords. The next one, the 6 chord, is A minor. Remember, that's the relative minor as well. And it is a minor chord, so it's a lowercase. And then we have the only diminished chord, The B diminished chord in the key of C is the 7 chord, and you'll see that little symbol next to it with a circle with a slash through it. That means half diminished, and we'll describe that later. And then finally, the C chord again, and that is the chords in the major scale and their qualities. As I play the chords on the piano, or the triads, in the major scale, starting with the first chord, C major, and go up in block chords like you see on the screen, this is what they look and sound like. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and again C major. So these are the chords on the guitar, but we're going to do these in the key of G major because it's a little bit easier and it'll make more sense later on when I do chord progressions. So the 1 chord, G major, the 2 chord, A minor, the 3 chord, B minor, the 4 chord, C major, the 5 chord, D major, the 6 chord, E minor, the 7 chord, F sharp diminished, and G major. Now we're going to show the chords in a minor key, and we're going to use A minor because it's the relative minor of C major, so it has the same key signature. The chords are numbered the same, but they're different qualities. So now we're going to start with the 1 chord, which is A minor. The 2 chord is a diminished chord, and it's B diminished. The C chord is a major chord. The 3 is a major chord in A minor, C major. However, because we're using harmony and we may be using the harmonic minor scale, that G might be sharp. So if the G is sharp, then the 3 chord becomes an augmented chord, or C augmented. The next chord is a minor chord. The 4 chord is D minor. Now in the next chord, the 5 chord, we're going to add the G sharp because in harmony we want that G sharp on the 5 chord, and that is E major. The 6 chord in a minor key is also major, that's F. The 7 chord is another diminished chord because the G is sharp. Remember, the G is sharp because it's the harmonic minor, so G sharp diminished. And then finally, back to the A minor. The next section in the lesson discusses chord progressions, and I'll be using the major chords from the major scale and the major key to discuss that and show it. I'm not going to use the minor. They are the same in the way that you would put them in a chord progression. A 1-5-1 would be the same. 1-4-5-1 would be the same. The difference is just the quality of the chords. So you can plug the chords from a minor key into the chord progressions that you're seeing and I'm using as examples in the major key. It doesn't really matter. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to use major keys in the next section. We use chords to harmonize melodies, basically. When we put different chords together in a series of sounds, we call those chord progressions. I'm going to show you different chord progressions and a series of chord progressions from the most simple to more complex using triads from the major scale, and later on in the lesson we'll do the same thing for a minor scale. Please understand, there are hundreds of different chord progressions that we could put together. It's infinity, actually. Contemporary artists put different chords together all the time, which creates the differences in our music. We can do this with melody as well, but chords give us that much more full sounding part, gives us the emotion to the music that we listen to. The chords are what create our harmony. Chord progression 1-5-1 using root position block chords. 1, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-5-1 using voice leading. 1, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-4-5-1 using root position block chords. 1, 4, 5, 1. I sometimes refer to those chords as the rock and roll chords. Chord progression 1-4-5-1 using voice leading. 1, 4, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-6-4-5-1 using root position block chords. 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-6-4-5-1 using voice leading. 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-6-4-2-5-1 using root position block chords. 1, 6, 4, 2, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-6-4-2-5-1 using voice leading. 1, 6, 4, 2, 5, and 1. On guitar, chord progression 1-5-1. 1, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-4-5-1. 1, 4, 5, 1. Chord progression 1-6-4-5-1. 1, 6, 4, 5, 1. And finally, 1-6-4-2-5-1. 1, 6, 4, 2, 5, 1. In the final section of this lesson, I'm going to make the chords different. And the way I'm going to do it differently is, like, up to this point, I've only been playing the chords as 3 pitches at the same time. Triads, 3 pitches, and what we call block chords. But you can actually also break up those chords and play the notes independently or singly. We call that an arpeggio. So that's what we're discussing now. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it, an arpeggio. Same chord progression as the last chord progression I showed you in the chord progression section, But rather than playing block chords, I'm going to play them as arpeggios. You'll see the music as well. I'll do it once on piano and then on guitar. So arpeggios are used to break up chords so they're not just always played as block chords. I'm going to play the same chord progression that I used as the last chord progression in the chord progression examples and break them up in arpeggios. It'll sound something like this. Now you should have a pretty good understanding of the chords that we find in major and minor keys. Now, not all the chords, of course, just the triads, and only the triads built on the scale degrees. There's so much more we can learn about chords, and we will in the future and future chord lessons. I hope you understand that these basic chord progressions that I've shown are used in an abundance of music, especially popular forms of music, and not just pop music, but country, pop, hip hop, folk songs, all of that. And much of our classical or symphonic music uses these chord progressions as well. Sometimes composers use much more sophisticated chord progressions, and we'll learn about those in the future. I hope you've learned something, and now you can apply this knowledge to your songwriting lessons and your composition lessons as you move forward. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I hope you come back. Thank you. Thanks again for visiting Mr. Rowley's virtual music classroom. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.